Right. Just running a test. Here, I might as well play some music while I'm setting up here.
They shout on screens all night, say they code just right. Streamers preach the way, but there's another day. False prophets wear a smile, lead you down the trail. They say you'll code like gold, but that's a tale they sold. Break free, don't follow, code your path tomorrow. No false prophets, no more sorrow. You can lead, not borrow. They claim they know it all, promise you'll stand tall, but when the hype is gone, you're still coding on. Don't be lost in the light, shine your own code bright. Mentors can inspire, but your passion fuels the fire. Break free, don't follow, code your path tomorrow. No false prophets, no more sorrow. You can lead, not borrow. Don't be lost in their light, shine your own code bright. Mentors can inspire, but your passion fuels the fire.
Yeah.
Break free, don't follow,
Think.
code your path tomorrow.
Just getting set up here, folks, so I apologize. Sometimes it's difficult to get everything set up. Okay. I think I'm good. I'll switch over to cam. I think I'm all set up. Hey, Laughing Panda, how's it going, man? Okay. So welcome everybody who's watching live, or this will be recorded later on. Sorry, I should be clear. This will be played later on as a recording. I'm going to get the Twitch ads out of the way. But just as a brief introduction, let me switch over. This is part of my Enlightened Programming website. It's a series of videos that I'm doing. This will probably be the last one for a little while. I'm trying to essentially go over the scientific data, academic studies, etc., that demonstrate that the IT industry is in bad shape. and so I've been doing streams, and you can watch them free. I keep the live streams up on my YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch them anytime. And then I put them on the Enlightened Programming website in text form and video form, and I add extras. I'll charge a nominal fee, like $1 or $2, for access to it because it takes a lot of effort to put it together. So that's it. Twitch ads are starting. Let me just get those out of the way, and I'll just do the whole thing here. Honestly, if I could turn off ads on Twitch, I would, but Bezos will not allow such a thing. So I'll just say hi to everybody. Hope you're doing well. It's been a while since I've streamed. I've been busy. I'm still busy. It's pretty late into my night. It's a weird time to be streaming, but if I don't do it now, I'm not sure when I'm going to do it next. I might do a stream tomorrow, but for anybody who's watching live without the Twitch ads right now, I'm going to be working with Odin. I'm switching over to Odin, even though I really like Zig. I'm going to be building, I've already been building a product in Odin that I'm like this close to being ready to sell. And then I'm going to be doing the ship chess boat game in Odin, which I've greatly simplified. I think I went way too far, way too extreme with that game on the Zig WebAssembly version. So I'll get that simplified in Odin. So yeah. There's still like a minute and a half on the stupid Twitch ads, but yeah, and it's been an interesting week. It's been an interesting few weeks, but in particular, like today and yesterday. I don't know. I've had some pretty, I've seen some pretty interesting things with people who seem to be, I don't know, true colors are showing for some people. It's just been a little bit crazy, like online, I mean. And the kind of the spats that I've seen back and forth on like X, for example, the people defending different positions about tech, it's crazy. Yeah. Anyway. We've got 40-ish seconds, and then the Twitch ads are over, and then I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to start off with an article from somebody that I follow on X. I think they follow me too. But they have some good articles. And it's going to all be around developer experience, but I'll just wait. There's like 20 seconds left on Twitch ads. And then we'll have like a whole, hour or hour and a half or something where we don't have to play ads. And then we can just go for it. And I hope everyone's having a good weekend. All right, looks like the ads are over. Okay, we're all 2 viewers on Twitch, but hey, better than nothing. So as part of this website, what I'm trying to essentially do is just kind of go step by step through the arguments around why the programming industry in general, just general, that includes programmers, companies, etc., are not in good shape. And so I go over articles like the one I'm going to go over about from Hassan Judy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And other academic articles. I've done this the last 4 streams, I believe. This is probably stream number 5. And what I do is, as you can see, I take the video form and then I create a textual form, which is just essentially like the script essentially of it. The last few streams that I've done are not free here, so they're hidden away, and I'm not ready to like I guess post them publicly yet, because I have to do some editing and make sure that they're correct. But if you put your email in here, the only reason why I want your email at all, period, the only reason is if you're interested in finding out when the other articles go up. But even if you don't want to do that, it's perfectly fine. You just go watch the YouTube videos. It's free. I'm not going to take those down. The only thing that I'll do, the only reason why I'm going to charge like something small for the articles, is it's been months of research into this, months of research, and it has not been easy to find scientific academic research on why the IT industry is doing poorly. The problem that I'm trying to get through is that any time that this argument comes up with me, it always becomes subjective. It always becomes anecdotal. Well, I had an experience and it was good or bad. Well, I feel this way because I did this or that and it worked out for me or it didn't. And therefore, insert some kind of conclusion here. And it's always anecdotal. So where's the data? Because if it's all subjective, if your perception of whether the IT industry is in good shape or not is purely subjective based on how you feel, then I feel that it's not good. And so what makes my subjective experience any more qualitative than yours or more authoritative than yours? Honestly, it doesn't. Who cares? Who cares what your subjective experience is? And that's kind of what I'm getting to in this particular stream. It kind of centers around this big thing of developer experience. And I've already talked about cults on a back-end banter episode. If you don't know what that is, it's from boot.dev. Lane Wagner does a podcast. It's called Back-End Banter, and he interviews people. And he was kind enough to let me on and talk about my experiences in the industry. I got fired for using HTMX. And I talked about this in brief. I've been around cults for a long time, most of my life. I know how they work. I've seen them inside and out. And developer experience, I talk about cults here, for example. That's why I have this up. But developer experience is absolutely, in my opinion, it is absolutely a cult. Or at the very least, it lies on a spectrum of cult that leans towards more of a definitional cult than not. And the reason why is because it relies mostly on your feelings. So here, an example, if you want to take it to the extremes. Someone can have a very good developer experience writing very poor code, and someone can have a very bad developer experience writing poor code. The person who has a good experience, which is essentially the feeling, how do I feel as I write this poor code? The person who has that good feeling ends up thinking that something they did was right. It overrides their logical faculties. That's how cults operate. Cults operate on referencing your feelings and accessing those in vast superiority to accessing your logical faculties. When people think logically while they're inside of a cult, they tend to find their way out of the cult. When people feel things inside of a cult, they tend to stay in the cult. Because as long as the cult keeps you feeling a certain way, it's maybe related to dopamine, it may be related to other, whatever you want to call it, chemical systems. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is, when you're feeling good or you're feeling negative about something, the cults win. The whoever is operating the cult essentially has you captured. So typical things about cults will be like othering, where other people outside of your cult are basically oppressive. So you might be the guy who really loves, again, I'm picking on React here, but it could be like, let's attack me for a moment. I'm the guy who loves HTMX, right? And so let's say I'm in an HTMX cult, and the cult tells me that anybody who comes to me and says, listen, Spiro, HTMX is leading you down a dark path. All right. It's not a good framework. It's doing harm to you. Do you really believe in HTMX? Why don't you do React? Why don't you try React? And my immediate feelings-based approach to answer that would be, well, I feel good when I use HTMX. and you're an other. You're not in my group. Therefore, I can make a bunch of assumptions about you. A typical thing that cults like to do is when they other people is they'll go, well, they're crazy. They have crazy ideas, and so anything they say to you, you can disregard. And so I can say, well, someone who's coming to me recommending React, trying to get me off of HTMX, really is just trying to ruin my life. And I don't have to listen to anything they say because they like React, which means that they're insane, because that's what my cult leaders have told me to believe, that React developers are insane and I shouldn't listen to them. And those are feelings that override your ability to think logically about what you're doing. Now, developer experience does have value, and it has like objective value. So, for example, a common argument that I hear back against my preachiness about like frameworks and libraries and not using them is, well, what do you want us to do, Spiro? You want us to go back to assembly? And, you know, partially my response is, sure, why not? Tell me why that's bad. And of course the answer would be like, geez, man, it'd take forever to do anything. People would have to like understand so much more than they do now. It opens up the door to a lot more issues, etc., etc. And to be fair, that's actually a pretty good argument. I don't actually want people to go back to assembly. I don't actually want that. But there is some kind of a balance here, and I feel like we've lost our way. And all we do is we focus on what the developer wants, how the developer feels as they're generating code. And this doesn't just happen in developers or with developers or in the developer community. This also happens in companies. But this is the thing, is once you start thinking through the steps of why developer experience matters and to whom it matters, the reasons for why developer experience matters change based on your frame of reference. And it's almost always feelings based. And therefore, to me, it's extremely culty, if not fully cult. Anybody who has an immense, or I don't know what you would call it, it's like an overpowering urge to focus on developer experience is probably focusing a lot on their feelings. Now, I actually think that there's a systemic problem. The reason why a lot of programmers focus on their feelings is because of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome was like a hot thing that lots of people talked about for a long, long time. And it kind of went away. But I had a long think about this. Why was imposter syndrome a thing? Imposter syndrome was a thing. Well, okay, just briefly, let's just kind of like lightly describe what imposter syndrome is. Essentially, it's something along the lines of, I don't actually know what I'm doing. How did I get hired for this job? What am I doing here? Why am I in this field? I don't know how to program. I don't actually know how to program. I'm just faking it till I'm making it. And there were so many attempts, so many articles, just lots of different attempts to determine why imposter syndrome was a thing. And I had to think about it for a long time. And I think I finally figured out, and it's actually really simple. Imposter syndrome was rarely a thing pre, let's say, 2000s, maybe even 2010s. You almost never, if ever, heard of imposter syndrome. But something between, let's say, 2010s and 2020s, somewhere in that range of time, I could be off by a few years, imposter syndrome suddenly became like you saw it a lot. Why? And I think the answer is because for some reason or another, in some forms or others, we leaned very much on adding complexity and abstractions because we were trying to solve problems. And as a result, people would sit down and they would do something like npm install or apt-get install or build something, or not really understand what was going on. They would just pull in whatever packages they needed to pull in. They would pull in whatever external dependencies they needed to pull in. It just did it for them. And then they would type a command and something magical would happen. And most people had no idea what was actually going on. And so they felt like imposters because they didn't actually know what was going on. And it's not to say that people, overall were dumb or stupid or whatever. But I do think there was a form of self-induced pain where people were just like, across the board, programmers to managers to executives were too lazy to actually care about the underpinnings of what they were doing. And so they would execute whatever it is they needed to execute, have barely any thought put into how or why something was running the way it was. All they had to do was look up a tutorial on, here's like your simple hello world get started, and then add features on top of that. But nobody actually knew what was going on. And even at an expert level, you had senior engineers who had been around for years, if not decades, feeling imposter syndrome. Why were they feeling imposter syndrome? Because they also didn't know what was going on. As expert as they may have been, they were also executing things with a whole bunch of dependencies. They didn't really know what was going on. And at some point, somewhere along the way, that bothered a lot of people. That bothered people so much that they felt like they were fakers, that they didn't really belong in the industry because what the hell were they doing? So all of this kind of leads back to developer experience and the fact that developer experience is very much dependent on how you feel. Because at the time, in a vacuum, it feels good to be able to run a simple command line and have a bunch of stuff happen and off you go to the races. It feels good. But when the metal hits the floor, or whatever the term is, when it comes down to, well, what am I actually doing here? You don't really know what you're doing, and your logical process steps in. And I think imposter syndrome is actually cognitive dissonance. That's what I think is actually going on. And I'm probably going to do an article about that, where I actually believe that imposter syndrome was cognitive dissonance on full display, where people's logical faculties and their emotional faculties were at odds, because emotionally they were feeling like the tools and experiences they were having as they were building whatever it is they were building felt great. But at some point along the way, their logical processes came in and said, wait, logically, can I step through how this works? Nope, I can't. And that's usually what happens to cult members. Cult members suffer from cognitive dissonance when their logical faculties are engaged and their logical faculties start screaming, hey, your emotions are not aligned with what I deem to be logical. And then they go, and at that point, you have to decide whether you're going to lean more towards your emotional framework or your logical framework. And that's a tough balance. A lot of people lean towards their emotional framework, though. And here's why. People lean towards their emotional framework because the emotional framework is much easier to deal with in real life. The logical framework is not. The logical framework is something along the lines of, you watch a lion kill a young baby deer, and your emotional framework goes, I feel terrible, right? Some people don't feel that way, but I'm just using that as an example, right? It's just an example of something you see in real life. But logically, you go, okay, well, in this situation, I mean, the lion has to eat something, right? What is it going to eat? Bugs, grass, right? So logically, you can follow through why the lion ate the young baby deer that's so cute and so, wonderful and whatever, but emotionally that doesn't feel good, right? And so what you do is, in order to avoid having things like responsibilities in life, or in order to avoid the realities of life because you're not comfortable with the reality that this has to happen or that I have to do something, your emotional portion takes over, and you choose that more often than not. Libraries, frameworks, abstractions, complexity, all of these things cater to emotions. And unfortunately, they cater to the lowest common denominator of programmers who function mostly emotionally. What I just want to be clear, what this means is that probably a lot of programmers actually have far more logical capability than they give themselves credit for. But unfortunately, the easy path out is usually emotional. Otherwise, cults would not even be as prominent as they are even to this day. In 2024, we have many, many cults that still operate in full force with lots of support, with lots of members. There are cults everywhere you look if you're just willing to look for them. And sometimes even if you're not, they're right in your face. Why would this phenomenon still exist in 2024 when we're ripe and abundant with logical information at our fingertips? Because as psychological creatures, we favor the emotional because it provides an easy button framework to deal with life. Your emotions can override your logic, and when logic says, hey, something's uncomfortable, your emotions go, it's okay, I'll take care of you. And I think that's actually what happened with imposter syndrome. It was cognitive dissonance from cult-like or full cult activities in full display, and nobody knew it. And I had to think about this quite deeply before I figured it out. I'm quite convinced that many people fell into a cult in the industry without actually knowing it. Now, that's not. I want to be clear that programmers are not the only people at let's say at fault, but it's not really at fault in all cases. But let's just go with that term for now. It's not just programmers who fell into this. Here's what else happened. Managers who are not necessarily executives, but more often than not, they answer to executives. Managers also fell into this trap, and they also gave themselves a level of complexity that was illogical, but gave them a sense of emotional comfort. So agile and lean methodologies, that was exactly managers not knowing how to deal with the logical fact that they did not understand what programmers in their teams were actually doing, and therefore they could not properly manage them. And when that executive came barreling down on them saying, why is the programming team not producing as we expect? Managers would go, I don't know. And so they needed to provide an emotional framework for themselves to feel good. This is another way that cults operate. So pause that for a moment. Cults like to give you a checklist. Cult leaders especially. So for example, a cult leader might say something like, I am the spokesperson for God. God speaks through me. I speak to God. Therefore, anything I say is as if God himself is speaking to you. As long as you do what I say, you are essentially doing what God says. Here are a bunch of checkboxes that you must fulfill throughout your daily life. And as long as you fulfill those checkboxes based on what I tell you to do, your life is going to be just fine. Don't worry about it. And that gives you a sense of emotional comfort that is unparalleled by anything that you could come up with from a logical perspective. And people gravitate to that. So now back to managers. What was agile methodology? It was exactly this. A bunch of checkboxes. As long as we meet the KPIs, as long as we meet the metrics, as long as our burn down chart looks correct, as long as you move that ticket from one point to another, as long as we mark it done, as long as we have story points, as long as we absolutely produce a fundamental list of checkboxes that I as a manager can do, then when the executive asks me why my programming team isn't producing, I can say, well, but I followed all these things. So I wash my hands of this. And it gives them emotional comfort. And then executives fell into the same trap as well, because all they saw was down the tree. They saw ways of giving everybody what they wanted. The developers wanted an emotional framework that they could feel better in. And so that was, well, give me my tools, please. Give me my abstractions and my complexities. Give me my command lines. Give me my, all these things. Not that they are in and of themselves bad, but that's the reason for them. It makes me feel good. And when developers feel good, productivity goes up, which in some cases is undeniably true. And in other cases, I think it's not as clear. And I'm about to get into that. And then at the manager level, the managers go, well, give me agile or things like agile, which have all been tried, in various different ways. And executives go, well, man, we can make everybody feel good. Really? We can make everyone feel good. And then as a result, we get like some short-term gains. Now, they didn't think it was short-term. They thought it would just be continual gains. It was just, we're going to set a new status quo. We make everybody feel good, and here's the new status quo. And that's not what happened. But executives bought into that. And it just so happened to flukishly work for short-term gains. And this is usually what happens in cults as well. Over the long term, if you ask anybody who's exited a cult, who has managed to successfully exit a cult, I think almost all of them will agree with me that there is always, in a vacuum, a short-term gain that you can point to in your life that lines up exactly with what the cult tells you should happen, and you feel good about that. So, for example, someone might say, if you pray hard enough, you'll get that job. So maybe the cult leader says that. Trust me, God told me if you pray hard enough, you'll get the job. And what you remember is the one time you prayed so hard, you got that job. And what you forget is the 99 times you prayed so hard and didn't get that job. And even then, there's an excuse for why that didn't work out. And it's usually something like, well, you weren't doing everything that I told you to do. That's just not what God wanted. That's not something you actually wanted then. You should question whether that's what you really wanted. There was a different plan. Insert any number of excuses for why it didn't work. That's exactly the same thing that happens with the entire my developer experience, my managerial experience, my executive experience, and the positives that came out of short-term gains. So for example, well, we made everybody do React, which means by enforcing React in our company, we were able to find lots of developers. We were able to pay them cheap because a lot of them were juniors, and all they had to know was React. They didn't have to know about the intricacies of JavaScript. Why would we pay a senior developer to know that when we can just hire a bunch of juniors at a much cheaper price and get all the features out that we need to? And then managers went, well, this is great because React has a bunch of guardrails and we can kind of follow that with our agile methodology. So we get a win. And then executives go, hey, that's great. We pumped out a bunch of features within a span of 6 months to a year. Look at our VC funding. And then we can exit. And then we get a bunch of money. And that means success, doesn't it? Doesn't a bunch of money mean that we were successful? And then users kind of, sort of, in a way, are like, yeah, okay, well, it just means that we get more product options. Am I really happy with the product and its features and its quality? Maybe not that much, but at least I got it. And everybody along the board just does this emotional, hey, look at the time it worked and not the time it didn't work. Because as I'm going to get into, when you look at things at a bigger picture and longer term, like for example, when you've exited a cult and you look back over the years that you've spent in that cult, you will see that more often than not, things were either A, illogical, or B, didn't work out the way it was promised to you, but you forgot about those until you left. Because you have these rose-colored glasses looking back. So overall, the entire concept of developer experience, I feel like it is valuable, and I'm going to try and be fair to it. I'm going to get into what is developer experience and why it does matter. But I don't think it matters in the way that everybody thinks it does. And that's what I'm going to try and delineate here. So to that end, I'm going to do what I normally do in the stream. I'm going to jump into a article from Hassan Judy. I'm going to switch over here. I see chat. Let me switch over here. Let me catch up on chat real quick. Hey Moldy on YouTube and hey Car on YouTube. Good to see you both. Six string. I think Jonathan Blow had a rant along these lines saying that devs today deserve to feel imposter syndrome. Yes, I agree with Jonathan Blow on this. I am finding myself agreeing with Jonathan Blow a lot. Yeah, developers today do deserve to feel imposter syndrome. They're a victim of their own making, and they've earned everything that they're feeling in spades. I think they've really painted themselves into a corner. I like this new Spiro, the Enlightened Sith Lord. Yeah. It's a symptom of incompetency in the educational training sphere. Car on YouTube, that's part of it. But I think the educational and training sphere just kind of capitalized on what was going on within the industry. The problem with laying the blame at the educational and training sphere is that I personally feel like it starts with the people who are currently in the industry, and they set such a poor status quo internally. They essentially, developers essentially walked into a field where it was praised to have a much better extent of knowledge on what was going on with programming than we do today. Not, you didn't have to be perfect or like, Linus level experience or whatever, but just a bit more than what we have today. And then what they did was they went, no. We need to do things cheaper, which means junior developers need to learn less. So let's make things easier for them. And then we also need to make people feel better about it as well. And they essentially ruined the industry from within. And then the educational sphere just looked at that and went, well, okay, if that's what you guys are doing, then that's what we'll teach. Because like, what the hell else are we supposed to teach? So I think they had a part to play because they participated, but I think the primary cause was the internal people in the industry, from developers to all the way up to executives, who made stupid decisions, and then it just, infiltrated everything else. Fantasy Spurs been node build, yeah. I would make a great mentor educator. I don't know about that. KPI count is a good KPI. A lot of MBA is just BS, just a defense mechanism to feel people who are largely superior feel less so. In part, I do agree with that. Bloated frameworks, yeah. I'll be Comrade Spiro, sure. Problem with making things easier for junior developers is it breeds a morass of complexity peddled by self-interested framework shells. Yeah, so I'm going to get into that. That's part of, I think even in this article, it actually touches on it a bit. And I just want to give a shout out just briefly to Hassan Judy. This person is on X. I follow them, they follow me. And whoever this person is, they have some really good takes on a lot of this stuff. So it's a light intro. It's exactly what I do on the previous streams. I have a topic, and then I read an article that's like kind of like contextualizes the whole thing, kind of like I just did verbally. And then I only have 2 science-based articles, which are like the boring, gotta read through it, gotta get through it stuff. I know it's boring, it's not exciting, but listen, I don't see anyone else doing this. I don't see anybody else who cares enough. I mean, I know there are some people who care enough, but what I mean to say is that I don't see anybody else attempting to try and provide some like scientific and actual like thoughtful contextualization of why the IT industry is in shambles and why it's headed in a bad path. So I'm trying to get through this. I'm trying to do it on behalf of everyone else. And I'm hoping that if I just do this, it empowers people with some knowledge that they can take within their own spheres of influence so that they can present better arguments than just, but my feelings though. So that maybe we can make a change and change the direction of the industry. All right. So let's get into the article on the lack of simple and reliable software to self-host a website. You know what? Just one sec. Chief. Hey, Car. I see you, Car. Yeah, how do we get rich? I know. Chief Multi-Hat. I get imposter syndrome once in a while, but I doubt it's like everyone else's. After 30 plus years of software development, seeing old ideas regurgitated as new, and so much dead branch knowledge is just some of my moments, mainly due to this agile poop as of late. So, Chief, I would argue that you are also suffering from cognitive dissonance. And okay, let me take a moment here to say that not all members of a cult are bad, evil people, nor are they stupid. And I think I hope I made that clear at the outset. That because you have like an emotional, there are plenty of people who are emotionally lazy. Okay, that just, including myself, I was in a cult. I openly admit that I was in one. Now, I was born and raised in one. I didn't have a choice, but I definitely had a choice when I got older to get out, and I didn't. I had to cut out my whole family. They treat me as dead. Literally, they will not pick up the phone if I ever needed to call them. Things like this. I essentially had to just essentially let go of my entire friends and family circle, except for a few who either were also in the cult but weren't really in it, or escaped, or were never in it to begin with. And that's a much smaller number. Okay, so I was there. So any criticism that I lay at the programmer cult members, I lay at my own feet because I know what it's like. And I think, Chief, you were suffering from being part of that cult, and it might have been forced upon you, where you joined something, you participated in something, not really knowing the consequences. That's usually how cults get you. Cults like to prey on people who are in an emotionally weak state. So usually after you've lost a loved one, or you've lost your job, or something terrible has happened to you, cults will prey on you because it's much easier to influence you. So what happens is you get caught up. I have been caught up by a bunch of programmers or a popular tech streamer, and I just, I'm at the point where I've just had it with other tech streamers who have all this clout and just don't care about the responsibility that they have, and they say, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, or whatever it is, or the developers, programmers around you, or the managers around you, or the executives around you are saying, look, we can solve a bunch of problems if you do this. And so someone like Chief or myself are like, hey, you know what, this actually sounds pretty good, let me just get into it. And you start getting into it and it feels good, and then after a while, just that feeling just takes over and you don't realize it. And then you look back, and that's when imposter syndrome hits. Wait, this feels good, but I'm not sure what I'm really doing here. And then you look back and you go, right, because I never was sure about what I was doing there, was I? If you pressured me on what all those commands did and exactly which lines of code were being executed every time I did a build process, or I compiled a bunch of stuff for the web, or something was really slow on React and I didn't know where it was. If you actually pressured me down to the nitty gritty detail of why something wasn't doing the thing that I expected it to be doing, most of the time I couldn't give you a proper answer. All I could say was, yeah, but it feels good when I can get to that point. And that's what you remember. So Chief, that's what I think was happening, and it's not necessarily a character I'm not saying you're a dum-dum or something like that. It happens to all of us, including me, and it's something that you have to be hyper vigilant. And I think what's happened is that in the industry we have become very much not vigilant, very much accepting of whatever the opposite of vigilant is. Well, betide the man who understands the NPM run stack. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to focus on the article for a bit. As far as I can tell, there is no computer program that makes it simple and easy to self-host a website for publishing content and hosting discussions. By self-hosting, I don't mean necessarily on your own computer. A server that you rent out from some provider is acceptable too, as long as you can easily move to a different provider without loss. Now, so the article talks about self-hosting, but at the very end, the author here very nicely ties it into what we're talking about. Why this matters. This is important for the freedom of people on the internet. The internet is becoming more and more centralized. You don't own your data. Big tech can shut you down. The answer to this is to host your own website and be in control of the data on it. But with the currently existing tools, it's not easy. Setup is difficult. Maintenance is difficult. Scaling is difficult. The current systems are all needlessly complex, and they often lack important capabilities. When something is difficult to do, very few people will do it. Doesn't matter if there are systems out there that let you do this if they are too complex and difficult. It doesn't even matter if they are open source. The fact that they are open source contributes almost nothing if they are also complex and near impossible to operate without extensive sysadmin knowledge. In the following section, I will outline what it takes for self-hosting systems to be easy, reliable, capable, and useful. outline. The system should have two components: a management program that runs on the user's local machine for, well, management and administration, a server program that actually runs the website and serves its content over HTTP/HTTPS. The management program manages the installation of the server program on a remote server, likely Linux, given just the IP and root login password of the server. The installation time is basically just the file upload time. The actual installation is nothing but creating a specific user and home directory for that user and giving the server program the capability to listen on ports 80 and 443. It shouldn't take more than a fraction of a second. Nothing on the server needs to be messed with or configured. No packages need to be installed, ever. The local manager program is an easy-to-use GUI and comes with a dashboard for monitoring the server and changing its settings. There should be nothing to configure. There are only settings that tweak and tune the behavior of the server. The difference between settings and configuration is that if you configure something wrong, the system might break and stop working. With settings, you can't break the server or cause it to stop working by accident. All settings should be optional. The program should still be able to perform basic operations even if some information is not provided. For example, if no domain name is configured, the server can still run and be accessible by IP port combination. The server should manage SSL certificate using services that follow the ACME protocol. It can use Let's Encrypt by default and allow the user to switch to another provider via settings. If the certificate management subsystem fails for any reason, the server should be able to detect that and degrade gracefully to just serving over HTTP. The website should feature dynamic content and interaction with users, for example, at the very bare minimum, posting articles and having comments for discussing these articles with visitors. Much better would include ability to upload media, pictures, video, audio, and providing a full-featured forum and chatting functionality, along with email subscription and a way to sell digital or physical products without the high fees that other platforms charge. Configuration of appearance would be nice to have, but I don't think it's essential. The default appearance should be so good that no one would have a strong objection against it. The system could ship with a few built-in themes for people who like variety, but full-on customization is probably more trouble than it's worth. The local management program should enable the user, the website owner, to own all the data so they can change VPS providers, etc., without losing a single bit of data. For example, it could feature continuous backup to the local file system. It should also make it possible to back up data selectively. For example, backup articles, but not forum posts or chat messages, or maybe provide a date filter, for example, only backup chat messages 10 days or newer, discarding older ones. I botched the reading, but hey, it's on text, you can read. It's on screen. I botched that too, damn it. The client-side manager program should feature a dashboard that displays various analytics such as number of visitors over time, resource usage over time, data usage on disk, emails sent over time and their status, etc. The server should be able to handle reasonably high load on a single machine that is cheap to rent. For example, it should be able to effortlessly handle thousands of concurrent users that are actively using the site and interacting with it on $5 a month hosting. No one should be worried about hug of death when they post links on popular websites. The server should also be able to scale horizontally by adding peer nodes. This would be considered an advanced use case that the vast majority of users wouldn't have to bother with. The way to do it will be via the management program. Adding new nodes is not much different than the initial setup. Just provide the IP and root login. The system will automatically manage all the nodes and make sure they shard the data and split the load in a reasonable manner. The server should be able to send emails without the user having to sign up for a third-party emailing service. In other words, the program can act like a mail server and manage sending emails robustly. Perhaps the user would have to configure some DNS records for this to work, so the program should be able to verify that the DNS records are set correctly, and in the case of a problem, it should inform the user which settings need to be edited, and how, in a very clear and easy to understand way. Ideally, it should be able to manage the DNS records on behalf of the user or provide the UI necessary for the user to edit DNS records in a more controlled way that does not lend itself to errors. The program need not be open source. This is a mere distraction. It does not actually matter, despite what many may think. In fact, the program should be sold for money in order to be sustainable. The source code could be provided for additional fees, but the license does not need to abide by the FSF or OSI definition of open source. Namely, the right to redistribute the source code or the program that is built from it is a phony right that actively hinders the effort of making it sustainable for the makers to continue making and improving the program. Now, immediately at the end of this, I was thinking to myself, this kind of a requirement set for a software that's like this is actually feasible in our day and age. Is it easy? No, it's not easy, but we have everything we need it's at the very least, it's much easier today than it would have been even 5 years ago. And it actually does shock me that we don't even have anything nearly close to this. It's not even close to anything like this. Maybe in certain aspects, there's some things that touch on some of the features that this article has talked about thus far. But this idea that you have localized data, localized websites with all these features, settings versus configuration, smart checks, etc., things like that. We should be able to do this, even though it's not like, well, let's just pop it off in a weekend or anything like that. No, of course not. Current situation. Almost every single tool for running a website or a specific type of web application requires sysadmin level knowledge to successfully get started with installing and running it, and even more knowledge is required to keep it running and recover from problems. At minimum, they often require the installation and configuration of a database server, which is a separate program you install before you can install the website you want to run. It is for this reason, I believe, that static site generators are gaining some popularity. They are easier to manage and they guarantee ownership of data. Since you write everything on your local machine, no one can take anything away from you. The unfortunate thing about static websites is they lack interaction with visitors, which is the whole point of the web. If you want comments, you must use a third-party hosted service, which defeats the whole point of owning your data and keeping the web decentralized. For example, the open source blogging and newsletter platform Ghost requires installing and configuring Nginx, MySQL, and Node.js. WordPress requires PHP, Apache, and MySQL, but the official Ubuntu guide lists 14 packages that need to be installed. This guide includes cryptic configurations and unfamiliar system commands that even I, as a technical person, don't understand. Discourse requires Ruby, Redis, Postgres, Sidekick, and Nginx. They don't actually tell you how to configure these systems. Instead, they rely only on they only officially support installing with Docker. Initial configuration is done via CLI prompts, but later changes require editing text files and running Docker commands. Why the situation persists. Programmers love complexity. In a way, programming is an activity where you wrangle with complexity and beat it down. It feels like an achievement when you take a complex and hard-to-use computer system and still manage to make it do something useful. So you have people who thrive on editing Docker and Nginx and hot proxy config files to make a website work, especially when they lack the skills necessary for low-level programming. It's similar to why people play puzzle games. The complexity of configuring multiple Unix-style programs towards performing a certain task is their puzzle game. For companies, there's no economic incentive to make things easy and simple. If you make it hard to self-install, you can provide a hosted solution and charge users a subscription fee. Subscription fees are recurring, so they are a more attractive business model than one-off sales. This is even more true in the case of open source projects. The most common model of monetizing open source used to be paid support, though it seems the trend is shifting towards providing managed hosting. In either case, if the product is easy to set up and maintain, there would be no reason for the users to pay for support or hosting, since they would be able to host for themselves and would not need support. This mindset is infecting other kinds of applications. There are now people who want to turn what was previously self-sufficient, standalone computer programs that don't really need an internet connection to work, to turn them into web applications and provide them as services, or SaaS, so they can charge recurring subscription fees. There's almost no incentive for anyone to make a thing that is architecturally simple and easy to self-host. A worse problem is that many recent programmers mentally reside very high on the abstraction ladder. They don't understand nor care what the computer is doing. They mostly think in terms of frameworks and libraries and programs and services. This is why most web applications are designed so that different programs handle different parts of the problem and then get glued together by some scripts and configuration files. It's basically Lego blocks on steroids. Programmers these days are getting their rocks off on being able to play with Lego blocks because they haven't grown up. For example, one program acts as an HTTP server, one program acts as a data storage and querying server, one program acts as a message broker, whatever that means, one program acts as a memory cache, and then you have code written in a scripting language that handles responding to incoming requests. Then you write a bunch of configuration files for each of these programs so they can sort of know about each other and communicate with each other. Tell the HTTP server where the scripting files and static files are located in the file system. Tell the scripts about the login information for the database server, etc. This is actually a simplified version. In practice, many companies' internal development process is so much more complicated. You can't just write code and then run it to see the effect of your changes. You have to run several programs, sometimes with cryptic or complicated command line arguments, edit some config files, and wait a few minutes for everything to start up before you can even do anything. After you make changes, you might sometimes have to restart several of these programs and wait for some time again before you can see the effect of your changes. It's crazy. The best they can do to simplify the handling of this architectural mess is to containerize it, which is very similar to having a virtual machine with many programs running inside it. It does work to some extent, but you must not underestimate how much developers love complexity. Once programmers get comfortable with containers, they start to design web applications that require multiple containers to be running at the same time. Of course, this requires editing some config files for all the containers to know about each other. They call it microservices. They consider it an advancement in software development. It's insane. Collapsing the layers. While containers may solve some of the problems of complicated infrastructure, they are ultimately just another layer on top of the stack. They suffer the same problem as everything else. They have a tendency to break for stupid reasons, and when they do, the problem is not tractable, at least not without extensive specific knowledge about the particular system being containerized. The proper solution is to collapse all the layers and combine all the different services into the same program. Serving HTTP and managing data storage and querying don't need to be handled by different programs. They can be combined into the same program. This requires a shift in perspective. Instead of using scripting languages, you should use a language that has a compiler that produces executable binary files. Instead of requiring MySQL or PostgreSQL to pre-exist on the system, you can use a library such as SQLite that can be embedded into the final program. When everything is just code and you have a compiler, it becomes trivial to produce a self-contained program that is easy to ship. You get the added benefit of not being run in a slow interpreter that struggles to serve concurrent requests. So you don't need to run 40 instances of the program and load balance them. You just run one instance of the program, and if it encounters higher load, it just uses more system resources to deal with the load. So much complexity can just completely disappear without loss of capability. This is just low-hanging fruit, and it's doable today, right now. With more work and effort, it should be possible to achieve 10x performance on a single machine and enable very easy horizontal scaling without resorting to a cloud service, just a few dedicated machines. So this is a great summary of what happens when you have people who do not either understand or don't care or all of the above about what they're doing in terms of the complexity that they're adding. And instead what they're really doing underneath is they're catering to their emotional faculties. So the ability to change a few config files and then say something worked. And I understand how it worked because I wrote the config. It feels good when you do that. It feels good when you've adjusted the configs. This is just an example of a type of complexity. That's a feel-good thing that you do, but you don't actually understand what's going on. You have abstracted away your knowledge to other things that are running, and all you've told it is what you would like it to do. You haven't told it how. You haven't told it why. And you most certainly don't know the answer to those questions anyways. In most cases. And then on top of that, you have other incentives that are tangential. They're like related to that. So for example, the incentive to make things easier for other people. And so somebody will come up with some way that they feel is intelligent to solve a problem. And they solve that problem in their own way. And other people pick up on it and go, well, that feels good. Seems about right. Let me just use that. And that's as an entailment of that feeling good, you pull in someone else's solution, but you also pull in everything that comes with it. I'm gonna take a second here. Let me see what's going on. Twitch chat here. First of all, Riz, thank you for the subscription for 8 months. You're crazy. Thank you, Riz. If you're a mom and pop shop, this isn't really feasible. So the idea here would be that if you're a mom and pop shop, if you were actually going to build this thing, you would build it so that it would understand, it would have the mechanisms built in to handle load, for example. So as a mom and pop shop, you would just see, wait, I'm getting a whole bunch of, a whole bunch of load, and maybe the system just automatically understands that it has to do whatever it needs to do, or you could push a button or, something along those lines. It would make it easy. Then what that would do is that it would actually enable the mom and pop shops to be self-sufficient. And if the mom and pop shop took off and made a bunch of money, and then they started to deal with real world scaling issues, then you might be able to afford having someone come in and take something that is already built on simple paradigms and expand upon it with a few more simple paradigms that handle your needs. Hey Nate thank you for the sub, man. Every Uncle Bob produces an anti-Bob 20 years down the line. Yeah, I don't even think it's a feel-good thing a lot of the time. Every time I fire up a Docker container, I'm filled with revulsion. Maybe for you, but I think for a lot of people, it does actually feel good to spin up a Docker container and have it configured. And the author is right. Even Docker, look at Kubernetes. Kubernetes is microservice Docker containers on steroids. And it's just bonkers to me how anybody can look at Kubernetes and go, yeah, this is fine. Chief, have you seen Microsoft Power Automate? Too bad so many enterprise architects just say, learn this process so we can all do it. I say, write a console app to run 10x faster. Yeah. Hey, Hassan Judy is actually on YouTube. So here you go. It's a great article. I just wanted to, go over it. Load for most blog-like websites is 10K concurrent visitors, which is not even 100 requests a second. Really easy to handle, actually. Yeah. No, I agree. It is really easy to handle. And if you look at hang on. Let me just see what Lem responds to about the mom and pop shop thing. They still need to understand what load is. And if they want the system to automatically scale up, it will cost a pretty penny. But you would also need a way to spin up a bunch of machines, which would be much less efficient than the Shopify model. So Lem, based on this article and what Hassan, oh man, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, man. I'm really sorry. But based on look, imagine this, Lem. You're a mom and pop shop, and you've got this GUI, and you're selling T-shirts, like you said, right? That was your example. So you're selling T-shirts. Man, it takes off. And the T-shirts say no to complexity, not even once, and it just it takes off. And the GUI will say it essentially is a simplified form where you don't need to be a sysadmin. And I believe that it was actually written in the article. You shouldn't have to be a sysadmin to run it. Essentially, it's the opposite of whatever this is, right? You don't have to be a sysadmin. So you can look at it and go, wait, I'm redlining, which is what they call it when the RPMs in your car hit the red portion, right? So your rotations per minute when you're revving up the engine, they redline. And you're like, okay, I'm redlining because I'm getting a bunch of traffic. That's what it means to you because you see it just visually on a chart. What should happen inside of something like this, like what's being described here, is one of two things, or maybe both. One would be, well, I'm so lightweight that I can handle, so what did Hassan say on YouTube? Blog-like websites is 10,000 concurrent visitors, which is not even 100 requests per second. So there's a very minimal amount of resource usage that can be used on a GUI, on a application that would be written this way. And so then the application would go, hey, I need to use more resources on what's available. So what you can do is you can have a reasonably priced server that can actually handle way more. And if you want proof that we are vastly underestimating the capability of servers, you can look at something like, what is it? Phoenix, Elixir Phoenix, Phoenix WebView. It's Elixir Phoenix, I believe, where they essentially serve HTML over WebSockets, and it is so stinking fast. It is unbelievably fast. It barely does anything with thousands of requests at any given moment. And then you could push a button to say, have it start up another server or point it to another server. You could hire somebody to come in for 3 hours, set you up another server. If you're making that much traffic and you're selling stuff, and hopefully you're selling that much stuff, you can probably afford it. And if you can't, I don't think your only option is resource usage, spin up more servers, etc. Sometimes you can do something like, okay, let's add some like really heavy caching or something like that. Hit a button and go like heavy cache. You know, there are other things you can do which are non-sysadmin level things and don't cost a lot. Okay, Twitch ads. Unfortunately, Twitch ads. Here, I'll put this up. Hopefully I'm doing the article justice, Hassan. If blogs are low-hanging fruit because nobody reads them yet. But there's a fundamental complexity floor. There is so Lem, yeah, since ads are playing, I might as well. There is a fundamental, here, let me just make sure I run the full ads here. Okay. Yes, there is a fundamental complexity floor. Like at some point, you're going to hit a level of complexity that a tool like this cannot simply tackle. It's like one does not simply walk into mortar, right? One does not simply handle a certain level of complexity. So I get it. You have to watch the ad. Okay, then I'll pause my response and hey, Ghost Magic, good to see you, man, on Twitch. There's 2.5 minutes of ads. I'm sorry, everyone on YouTube and anywhere else. It's stupid. I wish that I could turn off the Twitch ads, but I cannot turn off the Twitch ads. So we gotta let it play out. Otherwise, then everybody who has to watch ads on Twitch doesn't get the content, and I want to make sure it's fair for everyone. You know, but yeah, Hassan, I appreciate the article. It's a banger article. And I just felt it tied very nicely, since Hassan can hear me on YouTube, because all you Twitch losers have to watch ads. We're a bunch of peasants on Twitch, huh? You gotta put your nose up at them. This was a banger article, and I thought it fit nicely into the idea that developer experience is not what it's cracked up to be. And if anything, it's, in my opinion, again, it's quite culty. And I thought this article was just like, it just fits so well. Like I feel good when I do it. It makes me feel good to put the puzzle pieces together. I don't really understand what's going on. So I get that imposter syndrome feeling at the end because my logic clashes with my feelings, because at some point I realize that I don't truly understand. Therefore, am I really a programmer? Therefore, why am I getting, and you know what I think it is? You know what? I think it's worse the more you get paid. Right. So back in like when there was a big influx of programmers who were coming into the field, like in the 2020s, 2021, 2022 ish. And you could be a junior and you could make a boatload of money in some cases. And all you had to do was like wrangle configs, you know, more or less. And then when it came time to understand what those configs did, you're like, oh, I don't know. Like your brain is like, I don't know. Your logic and your feelings don't match. And then you feel imposter syndrome, which is cognitive dissonance, which is the cult shining through. I just genuinely think it's cult behavior. And I've been there. I've been there in the industry where I latched onto something and I went, holy crap, this is so easy. And then I look back on it and I'm like, wait, what the hell was I thinking? That wasn't the right. No, it's bonkers. And I'm thankful for people like Hassan who can see through that, because I think very few people can. Hassan on YouTube says, the more you get paid, the more responsibility you have to not complain about garbage DX. Like, can you imagine being paid $20,000 a month as a consultant and then complain about Next.js or Docker? Yeah. Yeah, it's essentially like the feeling that it would feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah. Where you're getting paid a lot of money to use these tools and then you go dump on the tools. It's like, I don't know, you're a blacksmith or something, right? And you have got like the hammer thing to make swords with, but the hammer sucks. But man, you make a lot of money using that hammer to make swords. And then you go, but this hammer sucks. And it's like, well, if the hammer sucks, why are you using it? And then it's like, it feels like you're about to shoot yourself in the foot. Okay, now to tie this back in, so Lem, just so as I was saying, that there is a complexity floor to answer your question, yes. But there are ways to circumvent that complexity floor in a piece of software that handles this stuff. Or you can go outside. You can have the software tell you when you've reached that complexity floor so that the mom and pop shop people who don't understand what that complexity is, I better turn this off. When the mom and pop shop, they don't understand what that complexity is, they can at least be told that they've probably hit it and they can go seek help. And it is a much more focused and educated decision to spend money on a developer or a sysadmin person or anybody who insert thing here who can come back or who can come in and help you fix that complexity. And you've started at a lower set of complexity. So just to kind of like tie in exactly what we've been talking about. So you get paid a lot of money. Are you really going to trash talk the tools? Even if you don't feel like the tools are very good. You're a mom and pop shop. There's a complexity level. How are you it's going to cost you a lot of money, etc. I am not going to go through all the details. Because it's free. It's on my YouTube channel, all the live streams. The last 4 live streams that I've done are on my YouTube. They're free to watch. They will always be free. I have already laid out the case via data, via academic studies and scientific research papers, which we're about to read 2 right now. Very soon, I mean. And they go into the fact that we're actually bleeding money. The money that tends to come in from fluxed into the IT industry from companies, into companies, into startups, into products. It's one of 2. Well, it's really one of 3 things, but overwhelmingly one of 2. So the one thing that you would think would it's got to be user payments, right? Like users pay for a product. And generally, sure, yeah, in some cases that's true. But in most cases, that's actually not true. If you've ever worked in a venture capital backed company, what they essentially do is they project current sales into future sales, which may or may not be true. And what will happen is that venture capitals or investors or capitalists or investors or whatever will dump buttloads of money into what they think are projected revenue earnings. So you could be making not as much by comparison in terms of user generated income, but your venture capitalist income is through the roof. And people equate that to success. And that's not what I think is true success. That venture capitalist income is so that you can see the fulfillment of that projected revenue. That's what the point of venture capitalist income is so that you can hit that projected revenue. In the industry, I've already gone through it. Again, like I said, go back and see the streams where I believe that I've sufficiently proven this to be true. Most companies these days do not make a portion of their income from user-generated income. They make it from venture capitalist income, and they consider that a success. What's more, if you compare that venture capitalist income to the amount of general outflow of money that happens on things like security vulnerabilities, which affect people not just financially, to the tunes of, I kid you not, trillions of dollars. Sometimes in some cases it is greater than some countries' entire GDP or national debts. The amount of money we spend on security vulnerabilities in North America alone is staggering. And where do you think that money comes out from? Where do you think that money comes out from? So if you subtract costs of defects, security vulnerabilities, costs of those things, and that's not to mention the cost of actual human lives and the detriment it has on human wellness impact. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. I have been through the data. I have sat down and read the boring, dry paper studies that have gone into what actually gets spent in the IT industry in mass. Refactorings, technical debt. Do you know that in the US alone, if you paid all the developers in the US, I'm not kidding you, this was true, I believe, in 2022 or in 2023. It is an actual study. Again, it is on my live stream. If you paid if you took the amount of money spent on technical debt spent as recorded in the entirety of the US by programmers who recorded the fact that they spent X amount of time, therefore X amount of dollars on technical debt, you could pay all developers twice. One for technical debt and one for their average salary in the entire United States. Where do you think that money comes from? Because it doesn't come from projected cash flow. Hassan on YouTube says future cash flow like this. Yeah. Something I also noticed, hiring more developers makes it easier to raise more VC. It does. Yeah. So an employee of a VC company, the value you provide to the company is not the work you do. No, it's a warm body and seat, because it's a signal. It's a signal that you have a person. You have people who, the entailment to someone who's looking to invest, the logical entailment would be more bodies, more warm bodies capable of producing code equals more features being able to be produced equals more users purchasing to have access to those features. And therefore they project revenue from that, and therefore they invest. Hassan, you're absolutely right. It's the appearance of doing important, complicated work. Right. Right. Okay. So this was great. I actually have to keep this open because I have to mark the fact that I went into it. Okay. So for the sake of, this is, I get it. This is not like, I used to build a game in WebAssembly using Zig. It was fun. We used to have so much fun on the stream. And now I'm reading these. This is the 5th stream I'm doing it. But this is important to me. And I really freaking care about this. So I'm going to read it. Not all of it. I will spare you some of the details, but I'm leaving this up here because you can always pause the stream or go back and actually get the paper and read it for yourself. I'm going to try and focus on the stuff that's relevant and not read too much of the boring stuff. Lem on Twitch says the flaw with your argument is that the way to eliminate most technical debt also involves eliminating a large number of developers who don't add value, so the gains accrue to the corporations, not to their employees doing BS work. A lot of development work exists because developers are just grossly inefficient. Lem, do you actually think that venture capitalists or investors understand what you just said? It's not a flaw in my argument. It's a flaw in the way that it is perceived. And Hassan and I are saying we agree with you. I would actually say we agree with you because I do actually agree with you. What we're saying is that the venture capitalists and investors don't see it that way. What they see is warm bodies on seat equals an output that's relevant to their ability to put money into the company. They don't see the technical debt. They don't even care about the technical debt. And I'm going to get into that. I'm actually going to get into why nobody gives two F's about your developer experience, about technical debt, about whether or not you feel good or not while you're doing stuff. Nobody cares, especially the venture capitalists who put money into it. They do not care. And the users who pay for it do not care how good it felt when you produce the feature that they use and pay for. They do not care one iota whether you felt good or bad producing it. But Lem, between you and I, of course, what you're saying I think makes a bunch of sense. Of course, these things have impact, right? So I don't see it as a flaw in the argument. I see it as like a frame of reference, which is kind of what I said at the beginning. Your frame of reference will determine whether you care about developer experience and what you care about it, not whether it exists or not. Okay. So I'm going to focus on this paper. an actionable framework for understanding and improving developer experience. And the idea behind me reading this paper is to try and get a data or scientific based mechanism or understanding of what is developer experience. Now, I have to admit that it is very subjective. How you feel about whether you were successful in producing code or not, or whether you felt successful in producing code or not, whether you felt good about the code you produced or not, is subjective. And because it's subjective, it's a bit ambiguous as to whether something is truly considered developer experience or not. Because I can tell you for sure, I know at least a few developers who would look at the current state of web development and go, this is the most terrible way to write code, period. And they would much rather write in assembly, and they would feel better doing it. And another person would look at the current state of web and look at someone else writing assembly for web, for example, and go, why on earth would you do that? That feels terrible. My way feels better. Right? And that's the problem with subjective experiences. Why should your subjective experience be the authority over anybody else's subjective experience? And you know that there is somebody who disagrees with your subjective experience about how you wrote some code. Developers do like to solve puzzles. Programmers do like to solve puzzles. That I think is fundamentally true, generally speaking. But you're always going to find someone who subjectively feels about it a different way. I know this for a fact. There are people who are like, I just work better in C. It feels better. It just feels better. I could write an entire web framework in C and do it faster and better, and I feel good about it. And then someone will do, well, like I like pulling in all my like 600 NPM packages because I know that I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, why would I go and reinvent a bunch of stuff in a low-level language and learn all the intricacies of memory management and all that? That's crazy. It's been solved. That doesn't feel good. You can find subjective experiences either way. But because I made a commitment to try and stick to science and data and not emotional arguments, I'm going to try and do it. But unfortunately, even the papers here agree that there is subjectivity with developer experience. Improving developer happiness and satisfaction is an important goal for many companies, as doing so may lead to higher levels of productivity and improve worker retention. Previous research has focused on understanding and eliciting factors that help describe or predict developer productivity and satisfaction, and which factors may impact developers' productivity and satisfaction with their work depends on individual team, organization, and project context. Developer experience, as defined by Fagerholm and Munk, I believe is how you pronounce it, is a broader concept that captures how developers feel about, think about, and value their work. This definition emerged from a review of the literature, and these authors claim that developer experience is also shaped by many factors, including team culture, working environment, and work activities, but, like satisfaction, is also highly personal. Fagerholm and Munk's research provides an initial framework for thinking about the different dimensions of developer experience, but it falls short at identifying which actionable factors impact developer experience, as well as why certain factors may be particularly important and how challenges that impede developer experience may be overcome. Notably, some factors and barriers that impact experience may be more actionable or easier to act on than others. For example, poor directional clarity in a project may be easier to act on than a developer's personality style. So what they try and do is they try and take things like things that get in the way of developer experience, things that help developer experience, so on and so forth. And then they provide some context around like the methodology behind it. So the background behind it is based on this paper from Fagerholm and Munk. It's rooted in social psychology from the concept of the trilogy of the mind, where the three main dimensions of human experience are cognition, thinking, or the logical faculties, affect, or emotion, and conation, or volition to act. Consideration of these three dimensions of experience is important as real-world problem-solving operates in concert with motivational, and emotional processes, sometimes harmoniously and sometimes discordantly. This is exactly why I brought up cult-like mentality, where your emotional faculties override your logical faculties, and that is just a psychological fact. It happens to everyone a lot. The cognitive dimension concerns developers' beliefs and how they think and evaluate their development infrastructure, processes, knowledge, and skills. The affective dimension of the mind, or the emotional, describes developers' emotions and how they feel about their work. The cognitive dimension of experience captures developers' expectations, motivations, and how they see the value of their work behaviors, their activities, productivity, and contributions. Together, these dimensions interact and shape the intentions for future work behavior and actions. And you can actually come up with like a pretty reasonable case for why this holds quite true. So you could think of something like, if you're in Agile and you need to meet a certain number of story points, what happens is a twofold thing. One is, if you hit your story points week after week and you successfully hit the number of story points you're supposed to hit, it feels good. And then your logical mind says, well, it also probably means that you're accomplishing something, right? And so you put the two together, and then it's the conation part that kicks in, and it's like, whoa, holy crap, these are in sync. I not only feel good because I'm achieving the goals that I'm setting out for myself, but I'm also actually probably logically solving issues because I can see the effect of like, we get new features out, something like that. And so the conation part kicks in, and so you want to act on that. You want to continue to act on that. Individual personality and other traits shape the three dimensions of the mind, but the three dimensions are also shaped by external and social forces, such as the nature of the work environment, and whether one is working as part of a team or collective. Factors that influence one dimension will typically also influence one or two of the other dimensions. The theory of the trilogy of mind aligns with our view of the developer experience and also helps us understand the important factors that shape developer experience when working with others. Okay. Now, right about here, factors that impact developer experience. Graziotin et al. It just means, it's Latin for like, and everyone else who was involved in the paper, investigated developer happiness, an affective state, an emotional state, through a survey, and found that the top factors associated with unhappiness were, in order of impact, being stuck in problem solving, feeling time pressure to complete work, bad code quality and coding practice, underperforming colleagues, feeling inadequate about work, boring or repetitive tasks, unexplained broken code, bad decision making in their team, imposed limitations due to infrastructure, and personal issues that are not related to their work. They also found that feelings of happiness correlate with perceived productivity. They found that happier developers tended to perceive higher productivity and vice versa. Bellet et al. Also report a strong relation between productivity and happiness. Now, you have to remember that this is perceived productivity. Perceived productivity is also subjective because it is usually a self-reporting mechanism. It is usually a mechanism by which the developer is asked, did you feel productive? And a manager is asked, do you think they were productive? Murphy Hill et al. Investigated which factors can predict software development productivity through a study with 3 companies. They found that being enthusiastic for one's job was the top predictor for productivity, followed by having supportive team members of their ideas and having autonomy over their tools and work. A literature review conducted by Wagner et al. Details even more factors that have been found to associate with reported or perceived productivity. Story et al. Researched developer satisfaction with their work, building on Wright and Cropenzano's definition of job satisfaction as an internal state that is expressed by affectively or emotionally, and or cognitively or thinking logically evaluating an experienced job with some degree of favor or disfavor. The satisfaction factories Story et al. Identified through a large survey at Microsoft include doing impactful work, being an important contributor on their team, having a positive work and team culture, feeling productive, receiving appreciation and rewards. I just want to highlight feeling productive, receiving appreciation and rewards, and experiencing a positive work-life balance. They also found a bidirectional relationship between satisfaction and developer productivity, and that there are additional factors that influence productivity: autonomy in one's work, ability to complete tasks, and the quality of the engineering system. Motivation for work aligns most closely with the cognitive dimension of developer experience. I'm not sure how to pronounce this properly. Steglich et al., through a literature review, summarized a number of social factors that influence developers' motivation to work in mobile software system ecosystems, some of which are the opportunity to learn something new, to have fun, and to collaborate with others. Beecham et al. Also studied developer motivation in a systemic literature review and identified many personal and work characteristics that moderate the influence of a large number of motivating factors. Example, good managers, task fit, empowerment, and demotivating factors, poor managers, poor working environment, stress. Subsequent work by Sharp et al. Proposed a model of motivation in software engineering that includes motivators, outcomes, characteristics, and context. More recently, empirical studies by Franke and colleagues identified a variety of factors that affect motivation, such as career progression and autonomy. Franke et al. Point out that motivation and job satisfaction are not the same thing, which aligns with the three-dimensional view of developer experience proposed by Fragerholm and Munk, with motivation more closely aligned with a cognitive dimension and satisfaction with a cognitive dimension. Previous research has collectively identified hundreds of factors, and many factors overlap because developer satisfaction, productivity, and motivation are related. Our research spans not just one or two constructs, such as satisfaction or productivity, but factors which affect developer experience overall. Hereby, our focus is to identify which of these factors are most important. Okay, so then they go and ask, essentially, explain what they did. So it's basically a survey, and so they ask these questions that they need to answer essentially internal, as part of the paper. What important factors affect developer experience? What contextual characteristics influence how important a factor is to a developer's experience? What barriers impede developers and their teams from improving factors that affect developer experience? What strategies do developers and their teams employ to improve developer experience? What coping mechanisms do developers resort to when factors that negatively impact developer experience are not improved? So then they go through a structured interview. They tell you how they do it. They do a Zoom interview. It's like 45 to 90 minutes. They ask questions. They get feedback from the developer and encourage them to make sure that they answer appropriately, things like that. And then they have a framework that they essentially go over, here's the framework that we use to, for example, here. Right. So these are things that we want to tackle as part of our us trying to figure out the questions we need to answer, the framework upon the questions we need to answer. I'm having a brain fart here. All right. Then they go through the participants. Where do they have the total number of participants? Oh yeah. It's 21 software developers. Okay. So it's not a lot. It's not a lot. Honestly, it's 21. But again, all it takes is for one person's subjective experience or subjective viewpoint to be completely opposite of one other person. And at the very least, it gives a hint, a light hint on what developer experience is. And so they go over the context of each developer so that you can see these are the participants up to 21. You can see what their company size is. So it's pretty varied. You can see which industry they're in, the team that they were involved in, and their size, their current role, and the number of years of experience, which is also reasonably varied. So then they break up the participants in terms of what kinds of contexts are they coming in with. And so then they have the framework, which we essentially went over, and they go over the individual aspects of the framework. Okay, so now we get to answers from participants. Hey, Frack, good to see you too, man. I'll catch up on chat after. I'm focused on this for now. Sorry. The development and release category consists of factors relating to developers' code bases, as well as the tools used to write and release code. Codebase health refers to the quality, maintainability, and ease of working in a codebase and its impact on developer experience. As participant 6 shared, part of what affects developer experience is the codebase itself. This is a tough problem, right? Working on a legacy codebase, it was poorly architected and just hard to understand, tightly coupled. All the things that make a code base tough to work with and tough to change. That is actually a major factor. The development environment was an additional factor, participant 1 shared. The very first thing that came to my mind was around the tooling or any friction around the tooling that either makes it really painless to go from I'm working on an idea to I'm testing that idea in production. The tooling that makes it painful to go from point A to point B. I just want you to think about that for a second. The tooling that makes it painful to go from I'm working on an idea to I'm testing it to production. They also added, what affects developer experience is how quickly I can compile my code, how fast continuous integration runs, how long it takes me to be able to deploy my change to a lab environment or production environment, how reliable my tests are, anything that extends the feedback loop. This factor also includes aspects of engineering infrastructure such as the setup and configuration, as well as debugging and monitoring. You notice anything missing from this answer? We've already been over it, so it's a rhetorical question. Another factor participants shared was having sufficient automated testing. Participant 12 stated, insufficient test coverage, for example, which makes it incredibly hard to do any changes. And then also super complicated code bases where things are really badly designed. So really it's about confidence in that case. Everything that builds confidence, that makes it easy to understand what's going on and be confident that the change you're doing is the right one. That is a big thing for developer experience to me. And if you notice anything, because I certainly do, but let's keep going. Lastly, a factor that emerged in several interviews was frictionless releases. For example, participant 12 stated, we spend a lot of effort on reducing cycle time, on improving the experience for PRs, to reduce the time it takes to get things out in production, and get them safely out into production. So all these things come together to deliver more software and to be able to do small incremental improvements without experiencing any problems. Previous research also identified that the above factors relating to engineering systems, codebase, tools, and processes have an impact on developer productivity and satisfaction. Here are some more, answers. If you have to touch a certain piece of code every other week and the whole code base around it is suboptimal and flawed, then making changes to that code is always very difficult and a little dangerous. Or if it's not tested well, or if you don't even understand the full scope because there are so many things attached, then making changes, even for new features, to that part of the code is not a nice task, I'd say. That's participant 3. The developer tools that people use are affecting developers' experience. So I work on the .NET stack mostly, and the tooling is actually great. But there is a tool called ReSharper, which is like an add-on that companies have to pay for, which makes you a lot more productive, and other types of tools. So I think tooling and the development environment itself is another big piece of it. The founders of the company, this is another answer, when we would go to them for that criticism or what we need, they weren't very responsive for it. They didn't care, or at least they didn't show any sort of empathy about it or any understanding of our situation. They just said, keep working. And so I think there was always an effort to try to improve, but we started noticing the patterns and gave up trying. We knew that at some point it doesn't matter. We just need to do our job. And that was kind of the reason why we would just complain to each other, because there was no point to reach out anymore because we tried it and it didn't work. I just want to like let that settle in here. Just kind of like soak up these answers. Having clear goals, scope, and requirements can greatly affect developer experience. So skipping down to some of the answers, participant 13 stated, the goals and ambitions that the product team wants, I understand them, and I see that these projects are important, but I think that the time frame that they want them in is not conducive to developing good software and lasting software. There's sort of a struggle. Participant 13 also added, I sort of have seen that high-stress projects with tight deadlines can lead to definitely degraded experience and interpersonal interactions between engineers. Participant 11 said, for me, what I find the most valuable in my work is that I'm providing value to the business. So if I'm able to find a bug that may not be fun or interesting, as long as it unblocks the business, I feel that I've done something rewarding that day. Participants also mentioned how unforeseen changes can lead to thrown away effort. The absolute worst developer experience is when I feel like I have a very clear goal and I get done or almost done, and it's like, oh no, we have to change it completely, because then you have to start from the beginning. Participant 7 talked about how agile process leads to changing requirements. A lot of work that I do ends up being replaced by some other work, like immediately. I mean, I see the results of my work, but maybe 30% of it goes to nothing exactly because the situation changed. Supportiveness, one of the biggest ones is the amount of time that more experienced devs have to spend with you. I notice that on days where everyone's busy and people don't have time for me, my frustration level goes up exponentially, where I'm struggling with a problem for hours that I know someone already has the answer to, but they don't have the time to give me a little bit of guidance first. That's probably the single biggest factor to whether I have a good or bad day at work. Knowledge sharing and feeling connected, participant 14. There is the connectedness to the colleagues around you, and it just helps if you have a very direct and instantaneous communication with your peers around you, which really helps you build connections, which also helps in how you support each other in a team. And I think that's very important for a developer, because I am a full stack developer. So we touch several systems with several programming languages, and I cannot be aware of every single system. So in some sense, I really rely on information from my colleagues. So if I have this spontaneous connection to my colleagues around me, it is much easier to get information and just understand and communicate what needs to happen in certain systems. Code review process, psychological safety, feeling safe and be able to speak one's minds, an open-minded culture where less experienced developers can speak up, communication between developers and teams, having aligned values, getting recognition, developer flow, autonomy, how much freedom I have in making technical decisions versus somebody telling me which approach to take for a certain problem. Now, this one I find so rich, because you're more than happy to import any number of packages that solve problems for you, that make technical decisions for you, and come with any amount of baggage like security issues. Again, as has been demonstrated in the previous streams, where things are getting much, much worse for defects, security across the board, both in web and software. But you want to feel like you have the choice of which bad poison pill to take. But not every developer wants total autonomy. Several participants talked about how having autonomy is important, but that it must be bounded. For example, participant 5 explained, autonomy. That's one of the things that comes to my mind, but not, let's say, unbounded autonomy, but kind of know your limits in a way. Know where you can go towards and where you can't. So you know where it's safe for you to experiment and be creative about, and so on. One of my struggles today is not knowing where I cannot go to, not knowing what's off limits. And that means that anything can be off limits. So you kind of feel trapped in a way. Maybe because you don't actually understand the tools you're using, because they've abstracted so much from you. And they've catered to how you feel. So when it comes time to logically assessing how far you can push the envelope, you actually don't know how far you can push it. Challenging and stimulating work. Participant 20 explained, the other part of developer experience is the work that I'm doing in and of itself. Like there is kind of like these bands, starting with this is just easy, busy work. There's that middle ground of I'm learning something new, this is challenging, but I'm not in over my head. And then you've got that top level of here, do this, and you have no idea what you're doing. So having the correct, I guess, level of work. Making progress without obstacles, having enough uninterrupted time, work-life balance, and being able to learn. Lastly, participants shared the stability of their job and team and having clear paths for career growth. So what factors were important to them? Psychological safety is paramount. One consistent pattern we observed is that participants described psychological safety as more important than other factors. More important than other factors. So how you feel about that crappy code you wrote and about all the security issues you NPM installed is more important than the crappy code you wrote and all the security issues you installed with NPM. Participant 9 said, I don't think that a not perfect code base is a reason for somebody to leave the company. Let's put it that way. Whereas if you have a toxic culture in your company, that's when people think of leaving a company and actually really do it. Participant 12 expressed in similar terms, culture is a very big thing. I would even say that these are like baseline traits that you have to have. Otherwise, everything else really does not matter. Apparently, poor psychological safety discourages developers from speaking up about problems or making proactive improvements. Now, I will agree here. If you do have a toxic work culture where you're constantly being pooped on and you don't feel like you can say anything, well then how are you actually going to try and make an improvement? Completely agree. For other factors that were shared through our interviews, participants described importance in terms of their personal or project circumstances. These contextual characteristics are outlined, etc. Presence of problems trumps other factors. One common theme that emerged is that developers perceive the presence of problematic factors more strongly and therefore as being more important than factors which contribute positively to their experience. This effect is known in research as the positive-negative asymmetry effect, or negativity bias, which describes how negative events have a bigger impact on a person's experience and memory than positive events, even of the same type. Expectations determine importance. Participants express that problems that are expected or perceived as normal bother than less than what? I don't know what that means. It's like so normal that the continuous integration, like everything is slow, that it is no longer something that is so much discussed because it also takes more time. And we have a specific team that is doing just that. Very much this. People become complacent with the state of affairs when there are a huge number of bugs, when things are slow, when things are non-performant. Developers start to kind of overlook it. It just becomes status quo. Managers do it, executives do it. Users, the end users do it. So when an end user opens up that mobile application that was created using some hybrid stupid technology and it crashes, 10% of the time because it can't handle the amount of whatever the heck ever you're doing with it, users just go, okay, this is normal now. Stuff crashes all the time on my phone now. It's normal. It's just how it is. Seniority influences importance. So the weight of these factors depends on your seniority as well. Personal interest, company goals, company maturity. So then they talk about things that can help to improve developer experience. And I think it's pretty obvious. It's basically just the things that were stated as problems. Just try and do the opposite of those or come up with like ways around them. But essentially make sure that your programmers are feeling essentially validated and that their developer experience is good. Their psychological safety is good. Now, to some degree, I can absolutely agree with that. To another degree, though, it's gone too far, where we focus more on how the developer feels about what they're doing. And so when they say, I feel good, I feel good, I feel good, there's a translation layer that happens somewhere along the line where somebody, say up in the chain, goes, well, they all feel good, so therefore their productivity must be good too. It's not always the case. But the point here of reading this was that a lot of these factors are indeed subjective. And you can even see that your subjectivity changes. So for example, the participant who stated that, well, our continuous integration being slow, I just got used to it. That's a subjective feeling that changed based on context. That's not a logical feeling. So if you're going to think about something logically, the end conclusion typically is a binary mode. It's a logical, it either is something or is not something, it is true or it is false. You typically don't logically change something or become accustomed to something changing from a logical perspective. Not usually, but that happens a lot with feelings, right? So you can see that, like, even with this paper, even though I do agree with some of the points, like 100%, there is a lot of subjectivity. So let's go to, actually, I need to keep that one up. All right. I'll read the abstract. Essentially, software developers are both users of development tools, but also designers of new software systems. Now, I won't read everything in here, but this one stood out to me because we started off with an article from Hassan about how we might be able to write better software for your average user that is high quality, very easy to use, and well within reach for us to build. But we often forget that we as developers and programmers are also users of our own tools. So for example, if you're going to pull something in like HTMX, if you're going to use something like Sublime or Vim or VS Code, or you're going to use a browser, or you're going to write a bunch of tests, you're the user of a tool that another programmer created for you. So for a moment, take off your programmer hat and actually ask yourself how satisfied you are with the state of software, tools, and web tools from the perspective of a user who has to write abstractions or other code based on those tools. So the paper goes on to talk about, IDEs. IDEs are essentially one of the primary tools that programmers use. And the idea behind like having a good experience with your tools is that as you're developing, you can get into a good flow, right? And that might come with so for example, they bring out user experience. They bring out the ability to concentrate and work alone for many hours, which requires things like analytical stuff, tools to help you get through that process from a logical thinking, aspect, piecing together the code that you want to do. And so all of these tools have an impact on your developer experience, right? And so it's like work on top of work. And so they provide a developer experience framework that is centered around Qt Creator, which is an IDE tool for Qt or Qt. And it is a tool that programmers use to create IDEs. So when they talk about UX, it's not about the UX output of Qt Creator. It's about the UX of Qt or Qt or whatever, right? Like, how does the developer feel about the UX? Does it help them get into the flow? Are they able to focus? Is the tool getting in their way? Things like that. And so they did a study. They had 57 developers from 25 different countries, and they kind of break down what they felt about using Qt Creator. When was this? What year would this have been? I don't remember what year this was. 2016. There we go. So if we go back down here. Okay. So they start off here. The use of work-related tools can be mandatory since often the employer is the one who selects the tool to be used. We measured perceived choice of use with a scale question. I use Qt Creator because I have no choice. It had a significant negative correlation with these numbers that they go over. Thus, developers who perceived high level of choice in use of the IDE assessed OUX and NFS higher than developers who perceived their use of the IDE as mandatory. In addition, developers with low perceived choice enjoyed using the IDE less. There was a moderate negative correlation between perceived choice and the IMI item. I enjoy using Qt Creator very much. So choice matters, and choice actually has an impact on how you feel about the tool. Now, this is kind of interesting because it's almost like choice takes precedence over whether the tool is actually good or not. It's a strange emotional thing. Best qualities of the IDE and opportunities for improvement. Respondents considered efficiency, flexibility, informativeness, and intuitiveness the best qualities of Qt Creator, and flexibility, informativeness, and reliability required improvement the most. So even programmers, as users of tools, so if you just take off your programming hat, you are the user of a tool that another programmer created. Programmers themselves have a ranking system for how that tool affects them. Efficiency, flexibility, informativeness, and intuitiveness. That is a massive overlap in how end users who are not programmers would rank the use of the tools that are built for them, whether it's in website form or desktop form or on mobile apps. Doesn't matter. Whatever your medium is, the overlap is huge because you as a programmer are also a user. So if you are the one who cares that your tool has these things, why do you not care about that which is that you produce with this tool also has those things? And so then you can see the chart of, the respondents and where they lie in terms of what they feel is important in the tool that they're using. And in this case, it was Qt Creator. So I think they go, right here. So Fragerholm et al.'s framework of DX addresses the concept in terms of factors related to the perception of development infrastructure, feelings towards work, and the value of the developer's contribution. They relate cognition to the perception of infrastructure, affect with feelings towards the work, and intention connection with the value of contribution. In our study, the IDE itself represents the development infrastructure and cognition. Affect and intention were addressed with regard to it. Our results indicate that developers also address the infrastructure via intention and affect. Their IM was towards both the use of the IDE and the development work. Some developers describe the best qualities of the IDE with affection. In addition, the overall UX assessment of developers seemed to be affected more by the hedonic than pragmatic quality of the IDE, since the mean value of the hedonic aspect of UX HQ was on the borderline of being a significant predictor of overall UX, whereas the overall UX could not be predicted from the practical or general quality. So just like I just said, programmers, as users of the tools that are built by other programmers, have an emotional response. Thus, our results suggest that Fragerholm et al. Overemphasize the cognitive approach of developers towards the development infrastructure. Moreover, the developer's intrinsic motivation also seems to focus on using the IDE, while Fragerholm et al. Associated it with the developer's contribution. However, the IDE is used to create a contribution, and thus our study cannot separate motivation towards the development work itself and motivation towards the software under development. So this is kind of like a duality that is at odds, because you definitely want your tool to assist you in your ability to create like high quality, performant, efficient code. That's why you would use a tool. And you could extend that requirement to anything like an npm install or a webpack compilation or Next or Vite or Rust package manager, or take your pick, microservices, with a bunch of stuff, Docker containers, any of the tools that you use. You want things to be performant and efficient. And yet there's still a like user-based view on it, like an end user, when a person who doesn't know the technical aspect of things is using a tool, they don't really care how good it felt to create it from your perspective. They don't really care whether or not it was like cutting edge or anything like that. Is it efficient? Is it performant? Is it informative? Can I use it correctly? How does it make me feel when I use it? So there's actually a huge overlap, and the two things are at odds. And I think we as programmers forget that. And I think at the management level and the executive level, we have to remember that there's a balance to be struck, and we've leaned way too much into one side and not enough on the other. Okay, now I'm going to take a break again. I'm going to run Twitch ads. Let's run those and get those over with again. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, here, I'll switch over to, so you guys can see me. Actually, no, let me switch back. And then I need to go over to this one. All right, so we'll let the Twitch ads play. I'm sorry to anyone else who's watching. If you're watching the live stream. I'm sorry, when I edit the videos, I'll cut the stuff out. Where is my... Okay, here it is. If I do that, yeah. All right. So I'm going to go over... Nah, leave it in. Hey, Arvis, man. It's been a hot minute, Arvis. I hope you're doing well, bud. Good to see you. I'm going to go... this will be the last part. This will be the last portion. I'm going to go over some stuff, but I'm going to wait for the Twitch ads to be done. It's been a bit. I'm doing all right. I hope you're good. I'm doing all right, Arvis. Yeah, I'm hanging in there. Appreciate it. I'm glad you're doing all right. I'll have to check in with you and catch up with you offline, man. Oh boy, I really hate this stuff. This stuff is so boring. It's just so boring. It's just mind-numbing. I just I want to build a game, damn it. Instead I have to talk to whatever. I just care too much to not try. But man, does it suck. 20 seconds on Twitch ads. I apologize, everyone. Sorry I'm not entertaining. It's late over here. I'm tired. Okay, jeez. Jeez. Our passions will be the death of us, won't they? Yep. They sure will. All right. Ads are done. Okay, just for a second, I'm going to get into it here. I really hate doing this. I just hate it when tech streamers pull up the stupid paint or whatever the hell they pull up and they draw all these little charts like they're gathering the kids around the table and everyone's got a little crayon and you're like a little child and you're waiting to draw the little thing so that you can understand what's being said to you. You're not a child, all right? You're not a kid. You should be a grown-up by now. If you're looking into getting into programming, you should at least have the capacity to think beyond squares and words. It's damn near offensive to your intelligence when tech streamers do that. Now I'm about to do it because it's really difficult for me to articulate clearly what the entire concept of like how developer experience goes wrong. It's a difficult thing for me. So how about this? I'm going to throw you guys a bone. Any viewer watching now and in the future, I'm throwing you a bone, right? The reason why I'm doing this is for my benefit, not yours. It is because I could not find the correct articulation of words to explain properly to you in an intelligent way what I'm trying to get across. And so for my benefit as a caveman dum-dum, I'm going to use the thing that I hate other tech streamers doing when they do it. Like I hate that they do this. And I'm going to use the stupid crayon thing on the stupid paint thing, and we're going to draw the stupid little boxes, and we're going to get through this, right? Lawler, good morning. Okay. Feel dirty. Feel so dirty. But here we go. All right, just a sec here. Okay, so So the way I see it, don't clip it, Arvis. Don't clip it. All right. Of course it's going to get clipped. The way I see it is this. You've got programmer, okay? We're going to call, okay, Proggy. Okay, this is the programmer. They work, generally speaking, let's just say at like a company, okay? And just for whatever purposes, we'll just call it Acme. Okay. There's a reason why I'm trying this out. Now, you have someone else and they how do I don't even remember how to, yeah, okay. And they're going to be let's say, you know what, let's put an actual text. So we'll put like I don't know, manager. Okay, and then we'll take this out. Or we can erase this maybe. I don't even know if we can erase it. I don't care. Here, already with the skill issues. Programmer, manager. All right. Okay, so you've essentially got at least 3 people here. Now what's going to happen is that somewhere along the way, you're going to get somebody who comes in and somewhere like up here, right? So let's just add a new layer just so that I don't like screw this up too much. So somewhere up here, requirements are going to come in, and your programmer is going to need to create some code. Okay, so we're going to put code over here. All right. Now this is where developer experience starts coming into play and where it starts going wrong. So the programmer is going to start writing code, and they're going to start making decisions about how they're going to write this code. And they might decide that what they're going to do is they're going to, let's go with NPM, right? But it could be they're going to pull in a library or a framework. They're going to pull in React. They're going to pull in Vue. They're going to use Rust with like a bunch of packages. It doesn't matter. Just your typical, like your standard go-to, this just works. It's just, we're going to get it done. Let's not worry about like, trying to be fancy here. We have tools. People have solved things. Let's just use it, right? So you're going to have NPM. Now let's just go with NPM, but it could be anything. Immediately what's going to happen is you're going to pull in at least one package. Let's call it a package, or some kind of external code. It's code that you did not write, so it does not live in this space. Okay, it lives like in its own thing, and it becomes a part of this. Now, what happens is that at the end of the day, your output looks great because you were able to accomplish, any number of features, right? And so you go, yay, my features are complete, and like the manager's happy and everyone else is happy, right? What goes unnoticed is what you've Trojan horsed into this code, right? So any amount of security issues, any amount of poor performance, any amount of bugs, any amount of licensing issues, and any amount of future breaking updates of a variety of any kind. So you not only have historical all of these, you also have current all of these, and you also have future all of these. You have 3 levels of all of these issues all coming in externally, code you haven't touched. Now, the argument here would be, yeah, but first of all, are you going to go write all that code by hand? You'd never get anything done. Fair point. Secondly, there are enough developers out there who care about what they're doing that they're going to resolve these kinds of issues. I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to say I think that's false. I think a lot of programmers create external code that you bring in and they don't care. If we saw an increase or some kind of positive improvements in terms of programmers caring about the code that exists out there in this world, we would not be seeing the kinds of numbers we were seeing back in previous streams, in the last 4 streams, where in at least 2 of them, I demonstrate by data that we are bleeding trillions of dollars, and we are literally ending people's lives. Not just so to speak, but it actually affects them. People actually have like real world physical impacts because of poor quality code, security vulnerabilities, defects, bugs, etc. And it's only increasing. It's not getting better. So I do not see any evidence that the code that's being created out here in this land, whether it's NPM or libraries or frameworks or whatever, is actually making any improvements whatsoever. And as to the first point, are you going to write it all yourself? Here's the problem. My argument would be, you shouldn't have to write it all yourself. What should be the case is that the code that you're bringing in is thoroughly judged before it's brought in. And you have expertise in-house who can look at the reasons why they're running an NPM install, what's included in it, and whether they should hand code it or not, whether it should be included or not, things like that. Our problem is that we cannot actually satisfactorily assess. We don't even have enough developers who can even assess whether this world that they're importing is of good nature or not. Why? Because we're so used to porting in all the junk that has been created in the last 10 to 15 years with all these libraries and frameworks, Because what matters more to us is not whether this world is junk or not. What matters more to us is whether you feel good about importing this world and whether you feel good about the features that are being produced. And whether you feel good about the code you generated with those features, and whether the manager feels good about, how many features got out, and whether the executive feels good about that, and whether the venture capitalist feels good about that. It's mostly based around feelings, and we have essentially negated the ability for a large swath of our programmers in the industry to be able to even attempt to determine whether what they're bringing in is risky or not. We can have our cake and eat it too. I'm not saying that we all need to go back to handwriting everything that we do, writing in assembly or things like that. What I am saying is that what we've done is essentially said, it's good enough. And then programmers start losing the skills they need to be able to properly identify and judge what should be brought in and what shouldn't. And so you have a large swath of the industry who at this point, all they know is what popular tech streamer, recommended to them. All they know is what they saw on X. All they know is what they saw on YouTube. All they know is what they attempted on the YouTube tutorial. All they know is what they saw a bunch of other, high profile teams do with tools inside of companies that can afford to take hits at the tune of millions of dollars in refactoring costs, for example, or tackling technical debt to the tune of millions of dollars. That's what they saw. That's what they go with. There is no actual proper judgment or assessment on what's going on in here and whether it's actually any good. And that's just to speak of the things that are being brought in order to make developers feel good because they can more quickly get to the feature portion of their life cycle. They can more quickly go from programmer to keyboard to code to feature because they write fewer things on screen. That's what's happening. A programmer now gets to write fewer things. They get to tap fewer keys. All this stuff does the heavy lifting for them. They get to the feature faster. Everyone's happy. Oh, but wait. Here's what happens, and this is especially true in a venture capitalist kind of like investor, VC funded, let's go for that exit, let's get that quick cash grab, etc. This is especially true of these situations, but it can also be true in fully bootstrapped companies. I've seen it in fully bootstrapped companies. They take no outside influence at all, and they just run themselves. And what tends to happen is that there's still someone who gets to decide the flow of money. So when that's involved, what tends to happen, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it over if I can. Here, we'll go like that. So what tends to happen is we're going to go down here. You're going to build, let's say, however many features, right? So, let's just assume that there's like a website over here. I'll zoom in a second. Okay, or an application of some kind, and it's got like feature 1 and feature 2 and feature 3 and so on. Okay, whatever it is, however many features, someone's going to go ahead and use this. Now what's happened is you've smuggled in all the issues here into this feature. And as we've seen in previous streams, I think the last stream I did, I covered a lot of this. A lot of issues, whether they're security-wise, bugs, or performance, go unnoticed, sometimes for decades. 10 plus years. So what'll happen is everybody feels good at the moment that these features are created. Nobody feels good when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you're lucky enough to be a successful company, post 4 years or so, when things go very bad and then people are unhappy because something in here caused an issue that you didn't even notice. And then to go back to what I was saying before, which is up here. These tools, these mechanisms, etc., have catered too much to the lowest common denominator, where when it comes time to hit that we're in a bad spot, there's a security issue or a licensing issue or a defect or a performance issue or something like that up here, the amount of people who know how to fix that are the exact same amount of people who know how to originally judge whether they should have brought it in the first place. So because you feel good in the moment about the fact that you were able to get to this point very, very quickly, and your manager was happy, and your executive was happy, and your programmer was happy, and everybody feels good about that 6-month, 1-year outlook, and you get all that cash, that doesn't mean that you have no problems. Nor does it mean that this was a good way to accomplish things. Because the cost of getting to this point where unhappiness settles in and the issues rear their ugly heads, the cost at this point, as I have proven in previous streams, I feel like I have proven in previous streams, vastly outweighs the savings that were garnered by, hey, we can just have junior developers only know React and build stuff that it used to take senior developers to do. Or, hey, we don't need as big of a team. Or, hey, we don't have to handwrite a bunch of stuff. It's all been taken care of for us. Or, hey, we get to write faster code because a bunch of stuff is pulled in for us and it's taken care of. The programmers just have to write fewer lines of code. All those savings are vastly outdwarfed by the costs over here when things go bad. And you can't always tell when things go bad, as is proven time and time again with the current state of the IT industry. And then you wonder why people have imposter syndrome, and why people like me think that developer experience is too heavily leaned on. So that's kind of like the overview of developer experience and why I think it's very cult-like. Just like in cults, what cults will often do as well is they will try and negate the negativity, right? So when you reach this point, okay, here's what happens a lot of the time. So let's assume that, let's pretend like everyone agrees with me. Yeah, it's great. Everybody felt great up here. And yeah, this shouldn't have happened. And then, yeah, you get features. And then, yeah, let's just assume everybody's in agreement here, right? So what happens is you get to this point of, something bad happened and we didn't see it for like 6 years. Okay. Something like that, right? Here's what cults do when bad things happen, because when bad things happen, your cognitive dissonance kicks in and your the cognitive, like the logical aspect of your brain goes, wait, something's not right. Why are bad things happening to me if I felt good getting to this point? These two things don't add up. And then what a cult will do, its members and its leaders, they'll come down and they'll put smiles on their faces, okay? And they'll go, oh, but don't you remember the good days? Don't you remember when you had to write so little to get here? Don't you remember how good that was? Don't you remember all the stuff we saved you? Think of the good stuff. Don't think of any of the bad stuff. You gained more than you lost. And I see that a lot. And what does that do? Again, it overrides your logical thinking ability and makes you focus on the emotional aspect of how you felt when you were here. It felt good. Focus on that. And then, to make matters worse, as if that's not enough, what they'll do is they'll come in with their happy faces. Okay, so you're upset because something down here didn't work, right? And so they'll come in with their happy faces and they'll go, don't worry, Remember how good it was up here when you didn't have to write a bunch of stuff because we solved it for you? We got you, bro. This problem that you're experiencing right now, we have even more packages for you, and we have even more libraries for you. And now you can do something like Agile, or you can do, I don't know, add your like Babel or Webpack or whatever it is that you want, a Tailwind now. Don't worry, we have it all solved for you. So even when you experience future problems, there's always the answer of, we have a way to make you feel good. So when your logical side of things says, what the hell is going on? Then the emotional side comes in and says, don't worry, we'll make you feel good anyways. And so you just keep going, and the problem just gets worse. And everybody participates in it because there is always something that pushes people involved into continually just regurgitating all the mistakes that they made in the past because their emotions overtake them. It is very much a cult-like behavior and mentality. And again, I want to be clear for the umpteenth time that this is not me telling people, programmers or whatever, that you're stupid, okay? Because I've done this myself, exactly this thing. And I've also been in a cult. So what does that say about me? I'm an idiot too. I'm pretty dumb as well. Ask most people who know me for more than 5 minutes in real life. They'll tell you how dumb I am. Okay. So I get it. It is an easy, it's a coping mechanism when you go through life and the logical side of things is telling you that, hey, something's rough. Real life's hitting you. It's a wall. And it's like, I don't know how to even begin to grapple this. And that's where I think a lot of programmers are failing. And I want to encourage programmers to start picking up on the passions that were there in years before, when programmers would sit down back in the old, I guess, whatever, 20 years ago, whatever. It's not even olden days. And the passion was there to try and figure things out and go through some struggle because it was exciting. That seems scary, I think, to programmers today. Oh, I have to go and the idea that you would have to go and solve problems that have already been solved here is extremely scary to a lot of programmers. And I find myself in that position a lot where I go, do I really want to be tackling this problem? I don't even know if I have the brains to do it. I don't even think I have the brains to create the kind of packages and libraries and frameworks that I see out there. They seem so crazy. How would I even begin to touch those things? But my encouragement would be that we actually need developers to be doing that more and more, and less dependent on just assuming that things are solved for you and that's it. And it's not, I'm saying that because I want it to be clear that I don't think that people who operate this way are de facto dum-dums. I don't think you are. Programming is it takes a certain level of, I don't know what you want to call it. Maybe not intellect, but a certain level of logical thinking that a lot of people esteem. They find it, unreachable. And if you're a programmer, then you're accepting that. But then just accept it and lean into it. And I would love to see more programmers push themselves to get to the point where they can at least have a better chance of judging what's going on here. That would at least be way better. Even if we keep all the current tools and all the current frameworks and everything, at least push yourself to have a better, be more equipped to figure out what's going on in this box that you're importing into your code when you're not writing the code by yourself. And if you have that ability, it starts opening the code to when you do write your own, it opens the door to when you do write your own code, you can judge your own code better as well. not perfectly. But man, we are in the wrong direction. We are just putting way too much faith in, well, it's been solved. Well, let's just use this. Who cares? Like, doesn't matter. There are no long-term consequences, or la 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 la. I don't want to know about it. Stick your head in the sand, or you just don't even know. You don't even know what to know. We have to stop getting away from that. Okay. That's it. I'm gonna end essentially the topic there in terms of actual content that's gonna go on my website. Okay, so let me switch over to my camera and I'll just You're a dum-dum? Yeah, Lawler. Hey, Omni, good to see you. I'll catch up on chat in a minute here. All right. It's late night, so chat's not very... I don't have a lot of people in chat. You might want to reference this DARPA challenge if you're talking about security issues in software. I'll read it. I'll read it, Omni. I noticed you left, but yeah, I'll have a read. Just giving you options, unlike DARPA. Yeah. 8:30 a.m. here. Yeah, Lawler. Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. I need to take a break from doing these streams. It's been extremely taxing, and the research is crazy. The research has been tough, and frankly, the responses that I get from people outside of these streams is like, it's beyond frustrating. I just got to take a break. I got to do something, and I've been working. I've been doing contract work, and I'm trying to like, yeah, I'm trying to like keep up with that, and then make sure that I'm like there for my family, and you know, just the general stuff. So it's been rough, and this in particular has been rough because I don't know, like okay, so I came here. The reason that I'm here is because of programming. It's given me a job. It was a way for me to have. It's a way for me to pay for my family and have a good time in life, generally speaking, without a high school degree. Even like grade 11 is the most I got, and it's given me everything that I have now. So I really care. Like it really matters to me. You know, I'm genuinely concerned for like the future of my family. What are they going to grow up in if people keep building, like, I guess the portion that goes on my website is over, so I'm going to start swearing. If people keep building like shitty software with shitty code and being like, this is okay, what does that mean for the future of like everybody's future? Because the last stream in particular was horrifying. The kinds of things like 911 went down in like entire states several times over the past few years because of security issues, because of shitty code, at least in part. And then entire wings of surgical like operation rooms, I can't remember which, shut down. Like they had to they couldn't perform surgeries. How many people potentially lost their lives to that? How many people couldn't get gasoline in 2022 because of a security issue that took down the transportation it's a transportation company that transports oil to the gas stations. How many people lost jobs? What kind of, like, how do you put a number on that kind of an impact? Right? So like it has a real world impact. Maybe not the stuff that like you and I do, but you never know when your stuff has an impact like that. And then on top of that, what if people continually write and degrade this industry to the point where I don't have a job in the next 5 or 10 years, or my job becomes so significantly harder that it's almost impossible to make any money in it. And then what am I going to do? And I don't think it has to be that way. That's the part that gets me the most. I don't think it has to be that way. I think we're inadvertently and unnecessarily headed towards that path, and I would like to see us off of it. Elf Logos, how are you doing? Kalimera. Keep calm, stay strong. You too, man. I appreciate it. You got this. Thank you, Lawler. Getting on that skibbity sigma grind set. Loving the beard. Thanks, Nakor. I had to trim it today. It got a bit long, because a bit long and unwieldy, and I had tons of neck beard, and I didn't like that, but I appreciate it, Nakor. We won't have jobs. AI will do all the thinking for us. Duh. Yeah, right. Move to EU where we have pure and unregulated code. Yeah. all these thoughts are not very technophile of you, Spira. Aren't you a real tech hipster? Don't put me in boxes, Arvis, all right? You don't know me. Okay? Arvis, you don't know me. How dare you, sir? Unbelievable. All right. He said in his AOT jacket. Okay, so tomorrow, because I need a break and I have some work to do, I'm going to be streaming tomorrow. I am going to be going back to the ship chess game, at least in part. And I'm going to be doing a lot of Odin. I'm pretty much moving to Odin. We can talk about it tomorrow. I'm done with Sig. And the good thing is I've already done a vast majority of the work in Odin, so we don't have to start from scratch. I needed to like make sure that I was kind of like thinking through why. But yeah, I'm doing Odin. I'm building a product that I'm going to sell in Odin, so I'm probably going to stream that, and the ship chess game as well. So lots of Odin. Just go back to some of my roots. I've got some contract work I have to do throughout the day, so I'm going to try and get that done first, and then hop on a stream. Try and go for a really long stream. I don't know, maybe pull 24 hours or something. I might attempt to do that tomorrow. 24, 48, 72, something like that. Who knows? Maybe 48. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I'm going all in on Odin. On a Sunday? Maybe. But I'm going to get some sleep first, because I had a huge deadline this week and I had to hustle and barely slept. So, I think I went 2 days without sleep and then a day with 4 hours sleep. So I need to get some sleep. Then I need to do a 48-hour stream. Yeah, exactly, Lawler. Stream starting what time tomorrow? I would be surprised if it was before noon. I do have to get some work done. I'm going to try and do as much of the work that I am thinking of on stream as possible so that I can start streaming earlier. I'd be surprised if it was before noon my time. So for example, it would be approximately like 12 hours from now for whoever you are. We all have to get some work done. I don't know about that. Yeah. But I have to get some sleep. I have to get up early again tomorrow. Get back on the... Oh, man. Yeah. Watching Formula 1. Nice. Okay, so that's the plan for tomorrow. If the plan changes, I get caught up in work or whatever, I'll just send a Discord blast out and just be like, I might just hop on Discord and just have like a Discord chat thing while I work. That might be, depending on what I'm getting myself into, I might just do that. But if I can swing it, then I'll do definitely a few hours, if not more, of Odin and boat ship chess. Back to it, building the video game, and I've greatly simplified. I think we went too far with the entity component system in Zig. That's my fault. We went crazy with it. We went crazy with all like the multi-array references and the finite state machine and all of that. We went way too far. If we just want to build this game, just keep it simple. And I think I have a plan that's stupid simple. And with Odin, it's really easy. And we're going to Odin it up and maybe build a product that I'm going to sell as an additional thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really want to do it. I want to get back to having some fun. And then I'm probably going to like play a game or something to offload, like that Duskers or whatever, the one where you program the robots or whatever. I might do some of that. Anyways, that's my goal, my dreams and my goals. I have a dream and you have all heard my dream. So we'll see what happens. But easily influenced, yeah. Not an influencer, but an influencee. Yes. Yes. This is true. Okay, I'm going to go and get some rest. Listen, folks, thanks for being here. I know it's a weird hour, and I appreciate all the viewers who are here and all the regulars. Nacor, man, shout out to you, especially. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. Have a good day. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I guess I should like find somebody to move you guys over to. Man, no, I don't want to move you to React and Node.js. Hell no. Hell no. Who shall I? C++, C#. Making a PS1 game? That sounds interesting. Send us to Pokemon. No, I'm not doing that. No degeneracy. Do not accept that. Let's send you over to somebody's doing something in C#. Mod support in Unity? I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to send you there. I'm trying to be what do you call it? Mindful of you guys. Try make sure I don't send you somewhere, too far off the beaten path. There is a game jam going on. I guess we could watch someone doing game jam, but Demur and Mindful? What's that? I don't know who that is. Demure. Oh, a Demure and Mindful. Jeez, apparently I can't read, Nacor. Apparently I can't read. I'm like, who is that? I'm like searching them up. I'm like, they're not a Twitch user. Who is Demure and Mindful? Herpa derpa derpa derpa. I'm tired. All right? Can't believe I looked that up. That's why you shouldn't take 6 month breaks between streams. It's not 6 months. It's like 4 weeks. All right. Okay. I'm going to send you over to C++ game engine. It's the best I can do. C++ game engine. error handling. All right. It's the best I can do. I'm sorry. It's like 10 years on the internet. I know I've grown old. All right, here we go. I'll start this off. Tired, folks. Okay. Hopefully I will be seeing you all tomorrow for a whole bunch of fun. Yeah. Have a good night. Have a good day. Peace out.